Welcome back to Those Who Build, a podcast focused on speaking to some of the best startup founders out there. In this episode, we speak with a good friend of mine, Martin. I met Martin while spending a month in San Francisco, and I was blown away about how he thinks about creating the next best iPhone apps. I was watching him code away on Swift, making viral content, building apps from scratch, from validating ideas, everything. In this episode, we're going to uncover how he goes about building the next big iPhone apps. So, if you've ever thought about making the next big iPhone app, listen along and learn from the best. Hey man, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, awesome, thank you. So Martin, why don't you tell me, what are you building and why?
Yeah, I'm currently working on quite a few things at the same time, which is maybe not the most standard thing you see nowadays, but it works for me. So I'm building an app for VFX artists. I'm working on a breathwork app to kind of teach you how to breathe correctly. And recently I've started working on an app called Putt Pro, which is for golfers to use the LiDAR scanner on their phone to help them read their putts. So yeah, I've got my hand in a few different things right now at the moment.
Awesome. So I want to set the scene a little bit, because you're different from the typical startup founder that you meet, which is a good thing. How old are you? Where do you work? Why are you working on so many different things? How did you get into all of this?
Sure. So yeah, I'm 25 years old. Right now, I'm currently working out of Toronto. However, that varies quite a lot. I spent some time in San Francisco. Before that, I was in Japan for about a year. I've worked down in South America and Panama. So I work from all over. There's not really a fixed location. So I initially studied computer engineering, basically because I really loved iOS and iPhones and wanted to learn how could I actually make apps for that. I soon learned that that's not what they were teaching in the classroom, and that it would be up to me to learn those things on my own. So that allowed me to get pretty good at just learning how to learn something without needing someone to like constantly instruct you the direction to go. So basically spent a bunch of time kind of gathering the skill sets to be able to actually make these apps. And from there, I got a job at a startup, worked there for a couple of years, and that gave me the freedom to kind of travel around and work at the same time, which opened my eyes up to like, damn, this is really cool. This is a lifestyle that I really like doing. But I still felt as though, even though I did have my freedom of being able to work from where I wanted, something was missing with me kind of carrying out someone else's dream or vision. So I wondered, yeah, would it be able to like continue this lifestyle, but instead focus on projects that I'm come up with and that cannot generate the revenue I want to kind of live this lifestyle I want. So basically from there, I've been on the mission to make that a reality. And that's kind of how I got here.
Cool. How did you teach yourself how to make apps? Because that's quite
Sure.
a daunting challenge for
Um,
people.
I had tried in the past, maybe 2 or 3 times. I'd started these online courses and they just never stuck with me for whatever reason. I think looking back on it, I think it was more of an instance where I didn't know anyone really around me doing this kind of stuff that it almost seemed kind of impossible. I was like, oh, this like how it just seemed like too big of a dream. But then I got to university and I met some people who actually were doing this stuff, and I noticed like they weren't superhuman. Like they were just like me. So I think it was seeing seeing that it actually is possible to make this a reality. That was like the mental block I needed to get over. And for like the first 6 months, it felt like I was just kind of copying the code they were telling me to do. And I was like, am I even learning this? And I'm happy I stuck with it because there was definitely a period there where it didn't feel like what I was doing was actually working. But then one day, I remember it just kind of clicked. Like it was like, damn, I can now think about what I want to build and actually can think of the steps to make that a reality.
So how do you come up with ideas? You've obviously got a few different apps at the moment. That's completely three different spaces. You've got golf, you've got breathing, mental health, and then you've got the VAF stuff as well. Like,
Yeah, I think for me, I just I like to do as many things in my life and try to experience as many interesting experiences as possible, and just generally be curious in life. And I think as a result of that, that's kind of where these ideas come from. So I'm a really big advocate for traveling because I think it allows me to view different cultures. I get a different perspective on the world, and I get exposed to things that I just would never get exposed to if I were just staying in one place. And it's through those kind of experiences where I get introduced to, in the golf example, where I get introduced to a new sport, or with the meditation example, I got introduced to meditation by someone I met when I was traveling. So I think for me, the ideas, I don't necessarily seek the ideas. I seek new experiences, and then the ideas come about almost as a result of these experiences.
so how do you brainstorm then? Like, what's the process? Do you just go, okay, you've seen this object it might work, you've seen this thing, do you just go all in
Mm.
and start building the app? Or
Yeah, usually when I'm doing something like this, I will focus on the most difficult parts first. So the most novel parts of that app, the parts that I'm not 100% sure are possible. Because I know that like a login screen, an onboarding, all that stuff 100% can be done. But the stuff like, is the LiDAR scanner precise enough to measure millimeter contours on a green? That's something that I don't want to have to find out at the very end of the process. It doesn't work. So I really try to think through like, what are the parts of this app that might not be possible due to hardware limitations. And sometimes you do miss things and you can find workarounds. But I always like to at least think as much as I can about what limitations I might reach and try to face them head on before any of like the polish is done on the app.
so how do you validate your app idea?
I will check on Sensor Tower. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sensor Tower, but it's a website that allows you to check apps on the App Store and how many downloads they've been getting, um, how much revenue they've made in the last few months. And yeah, so that's usually where I'll go initially, just to get a gauge for like, yeah, are people paying money or downloading apps in this realm already? Um, so that's kind of the first place I go to check. Then I will also go to App Figures, which is a website that allows you to see the keywords that are used for App Store optimization. And you can kind of see how difficult it will be to be ranked on the App Store for the industry that you're planning on releasing in. So that's kind of like the first precursory check. And then from there, usually I'll check out the other competitors' apps, try them out, see what they're doing well, um, see what they're not doing not so great, see where I could do better. And finally, I will check out in terms of distribution what the competitors are doing. Um, so is there an app that's like it's a really, really good app, but it's not necessarily marketing that well? That could be a good opportunity just to create something similar, but really hammer home the marketing. Or maybe there's an app that is marketing really well, but the product they're offering isn't that great. So that could be an opportunity to build a really good product and market it well. And also talking to other people that are in this space. So with my golf app, I had found a guy who had tried building this same kind of concept 5 or 6 years ago, and the app no longer existed. So I reached out to him and I had like an hour call with him to see why it didn't work for him and kind of if I would maybe hit those same issues or if I could see ways around the issues that he was facing.
Very cool. Um, so have you ever started building any apps and realized before you've released it that it's not working and you
Yeah.
haven't continued with it?
So usually I will release at least the bare bones version of whatever project I start building, because usually for me to start building it, I will have done that validation beforehand. But there's definitely been times where I've released something that hasn't had the response that I would have hoped. And yeah, I think that is just a part of the process. I think regardless, you learn so much from these apps that you just carry on to your next project. That I try not to be too paralyzed by like, is this going to be like a super successful app? I want it to be obviously successful, but I know either way, I'm going to get something out of it.
What's your goal with this? Obviously, 25, still young, and you've you're building apps. Is it the plan to do for the rest of your life? Like, where are you seeing this?
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's a tough question to answer, to be completely honest. Right now, I would say my goal is just to expose myself to as many experiences as possible. And I think that the way I can do that is for is to be developing these apps, because this gives me time freedom, this gives me financial freedom, and I think those are just prerequisites to be able to explore the world, and which will ultimately help me down the road. So right now, those are like
And then
biggest priorities in my life.
you're obviously traveling a bit and yet spend time wherever you want. Has this given you the financial freedom to do that, or to recommend it to someone else who wants to maybe live the indie hacker lifestyle and build apps because they've got the capabilities to do so? There's obviously a risk there, them not earning. How would you say for them to get started and start earning?
Yeah, I think that's that's a really good point. I think at the beginning, I really think the best way is doing this while you have some steady source of income. If you're going to be doing the indie hacker bootstrapping method, I think that's honestly the best way at the beginning, because you're trying to find something that at least generate some revenue. I think going all in on something before it's hit any revenue is probably a little too risky for my taste. Maybe for some people that's okay. But I feel like that's just like a little unnecessary stress. It's a long game, right? So it's hard to do your best work when you're under super strong financial stress. And that's why I do recommend that, yeah, to get started is just to like start it as a side hustle and slowly grow it until it gets to the point where maybe it doesn't generate as much as your main job yet, but enough to like cover your living expenses. And yeah, from there, I think it makes sense to take the jump.
There's a lot more entrepreneurs out there I've noticed. Um, it sometimes take the jump before they start making revenue. And don't get me wrong, I think I made that mistake as well. Um, but now you've got that, and that advice to still work at a job or yes, something on the side is what I would tell myself. How do you think about this the social pressure of being an indie hacker and traveling and coding and being your own boss, compared to like maybe some of your friends who work in a or maybe pressure from your parents or whatnot to get a stable income?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, yeah, ever present. I think depending on people's circumstances, it might happen more or less. But yeah, it's definitely something that I experience. I think at the end of the day, you just have to kind of remember why you're doing this. And for me, that sometimes takes just like spending a day like writing things down of like where I'm trying to go, and why this life, even if it gets difficult at times, is ultimately better for me and for my future than the life that other people might want from me. Yeah, I think, yeah, at the end of the day, you know yourself the best. So,
So for people listening out there and they're thinking about, they've always thought of this really cool app idea or they've really thought of this cool product they want to build, what would the steps you would take or you advise them to take from 0 to maybe 1 or 2?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, if I was starting a new app tomorrow, what I would do first, as I kind of touched on earlier, competitor analysis. Find like 5 or 10 of the most similar apps you can. There will always be some apps that are similar in some regard. That's okay. I remember when I first started, I thought if my app idea wasn't like, if I wasn't the first one to ever think of this, like I shouldn't do it, which is just not the case. So check out who's doing something similar and then go through all their apps, get a spreadsheet and write down what they're doing well, what they're not doing so great on. Also write in, if you go to Sensor Tower, how many downloads they got last week, what their revenue was last week, and what their marketing channels are. So Instagram, TikTok. You can go to Facebook Ads Manager, I believe that's what it's called, and you can see what pretty much any company is running for their ads. And yeah, just compiling first a full competitor analysis to see if this seems like a viable app. Once that's done, you've decided that, okay, this is something that seems like there could be something there. I would, yeah, immediately start building. I was building with in mind that you should try to focus on one main feature first. Um, what do you think is the most convincing feature that will get people to download or use your app? Just build like the first version of that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Honestly, like at this point, speed is definitely what you're going for because yeah, a lot of times the idea won't work. So just try to get your MVP one feature done and yeah, get that submitted to the App Store. From there, just start pushing a bunch of content out on Instagram and TikTok is what I've had most success with. And yeah, once again, find what's working with your competitors, try to do something similar, stay with the same kind of content styles for at least 10 to 15 posts. And from there, you should kind of get a feel for do people want this? Are people downloading this? Should I stick with this project? Should I move to something not new? Yeah, that's at least how I get off the ground.
You mentioned something about content there, which we haven't touched on. Content, is it an important part of the app?
Yeah, no, 100%. In terms of getting downloads, the main ways you can get downloads these days are through paid ads, organic marketing, or App Store optimization. And recently, I've been really checking out the organic content method, and there's a lot of downloads to be had, there's a lot of opportunity there. So if you are getting started with that way of marketing your app, my advice, what's worked for me, has been posting 3 times a day on Instagram and TikTok of like a similar content style, like maybe the same text, but different visuals in the background, something along those lines, and sticking with that same content style for at least 1 week. If it doesn't work, move to a new content style. That's been what I've been doing and that's been working. And from the people I talk to, it's been working for them too. So yeah.
How do you know if that content style is driving download, but how do you know
Yeah,
you're, like,
that's that
actually using your
yeah, that's a good one. At the beginning, it's hard to truly know at the beginning. I think one of the strongest indicator you have at the beginning is, well, revenue, but secondly is downloads. Further on down the road, you can start like measuring retention. So how many people are using your app after a month, after 6 months. But at the beginning, for me at least, to at least check out or to decide if this is worth spending more time into, downloads is a really good signal. Okay, yeah, people are at least willing to put this piece of software on their phone, which I think is a pretty big step. I think it's a bigger step than just visiting like the website, for example.
and what's the hardest part about building these apps?
Hmm. I think something that I find hard that I'm trying to get better at is you gain an emotional attachment to what you're building. Um, at least I do. And I think that in an ideal world, you want to have passion for what you're building, but you want to distance your emotions from the success of your app a lot of times. You don't want, like, if your app's doing really well, then you're in a really good mood. If your app's doing bad, you're in a bad mood. That's like not a good way to go about things. And I've had trouble with that. Something I'm trying to get better at. And I think it's just like, yeah, it's a part of just being a human. Um, but for me, I think that's a difficult part of it.
I think that is the same trap that basically every startup founder falls into. Every hashtag we build it falls into. Um, yeah. Um, cool. So this has been awesome. To finish off, I've just got one question to ask to everyone. Um, what's one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self starting out?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think um, I you are capable of doing it. You have everything it takes to make it real, whatever that is. It just, yeah, it starts with the belief. That's like 60% of the battle. And then once you have the belief, just put in the work and you can make things happen. Short and sweet.
Yeah, awesome. That's been great. No, that's perfect. That's
Awesome.
nice one.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool.
cool. Yeah. Appreciate you having me on.